The Northern Ireland Protocol remains a sticking point between the UK and the EU. The British Foreign Secretary claims that London's plan to override some post-Brexit trade rules does not break international law, and there is no reason for the EU to take legal action over the UK's plans to change parts of the agreement. And that after the bloc threatened against London's unilateral revision of Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trade arrangements. Britain has introduced legislation that would remove customs checks on some goods entering Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. The EU calls this a violation of the deal. The EU Commission is considering reopening a suspended infringement procedure against Britain. Welcome to the Spotlight. I'm your host, Behruz Najafi, and these are our guests in this episode of the program. Journalist and commentator James Tweedie joining us out of Plymouth. Also with us will be journalist, author, and activist Hughes out of Belfast. Good to have both of you on the show, gentlemen. Now, starting with James, the EU's threatening with legal action. As you heard, the US is urging negotiations. Prime Minister Johnson claiming that there is no other way to protect the peace process. Such a mess, isn't it?
Well, it's gotten that way. The question is, on what basis are they going to take legal action? The accusation against Britain is that this would be a breach of international law. That doesn't really stand up, I don't think, because the action that Britain is going to take is essentially to invoke Article 16 of the protocol. So, it's not a breach of the treaty because it's part of the treaty. And that, if you read describe that as tearing up the treaty, but it obviously it's not. What it means is that you, including the EU, take action, the protocol or the fine, if free trade. But then when you read, what you see is, well, okay, that they've got to give the answer.
Okay, unfortunately we lost that connection. So let me go to Fra Hughes. Fra, the Northern Ireland Protocol is a crucial part of the post-Brexit trade agreement. So what are the chances of a trade war between Britain and the EU now that the legislation overrides parts of the Brexit deal?
I think it's important that it's quite possible that there could be a trade war, not only with the European Union, but also with America. I believe it was Nancy Pelosi stated that if Britain introduced unilateral changes to the agreed Brexit Northern Ireland Protocol, that would endanger any future trade agreements with the United Kingdom, between the United Kingdom and the USA. But I think what we have here is a case of the tail wagging the dog. There's nothing in these changes that are really in the interests of the people of Great Britain, that being Scotland, England and Wales, as the Northern Ireland Protocol does not affect them. What it does affect is a small section of society here who want to remain pro-British. They are the British settler colonial residents from several hundred years ago. These people are the ones who are dictating what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. We have the DUP as the regional kind of political representatives of working class, middle class loyalists and unionists, refusing to go into the regional assembly at Stormont. And without them, you cannot have a functioning, devolved assembly without cross-community bilateral support. We also have threats of violence from loyalist paramilitaries in the background. And indeed, only last week, a man was stopped on the Shankill Road as someone by the name of Winston Irvine, who had 2 firearms and 200 bullets in the boot of his car. So I think this is more to do with appeasing unionism and loyalism than it has anything to do with upholding the sovereign rights that the UK says is at the forefront of these further needed and required negotiations.
Okay. James, the embattled British Prime Minister is saying that the proposed changes are relatively trivial. The EU firmly opposes the move. It says that the unilateral action is a clear breach of international law. How do you look at this?
Okay, look, the argument that Johnson knew what he was signing up for, and you know, was not naive and knew that the Northern Ireland Protocol would mean this is yeah, that's valid. That holds water. The European Union's this is going to somehow undermine that it's necessary, that the protocol is even necessary, is questionable in itself, because the protocol, let's say, it keeps Northern Ireland in the EU's internal market, and therefore not in the British trade jurisdiction, let's say. And the argument for that is that they don't, and it restricts the flow of goods from the UK into Northern Ireland, the rest of the UK into Northern Ireland. And you know, their argument is that Britain, you know, might use, if they don't have customs checks on those goods, the UK might be able to smuggle goods into the EU. Well, that's not going to work, is it? That doesn't fly, because most of the trade that goes between Britain and Ireland, the island of Ireland, as they say, goes to the Republic. It goes through Dublin and other ports, and comes back the other way, by the way. And very little passes over that land border between the six counties, as they say, and the Republic. What goes over is local traffic. So that's a canard. The EU has, you know, the EU is not innocent here. They've been refusing to negotiate on this, and you know, the British government's accusation in that regard is valid. What else can we say? Britain is talking about invoking Article 16 of the treaty. It's in the treaty, you know. And what does it mean? Right. Well, it means either side can make changes if it's disrupting trade or if it's disrupting social cohesion. Now, the British government says, well, yeah, it is, because people are rioting about this. And you may say, well, the people who are rioting are the Unionists, and the Unionists are opposed to the protocol, and, you know, they're creating the conditions, but, you know, it's there. I mean, by the way, when the protocol was being, and the whole withdrawal agreement was being negotiated, Sinn Féin's threatened, well, they warned, not threatened particularly, they warned that there would be a return to violence if the hard border imposed between Northern Ireland and the Republic. That warning sounds a lot like a threat. It's not a very credible threat, because the Belfast Peace Agreement was signed back in 1998, and the people who were fighting are, you know, rather old now, and they probably don't want to go back to any kind of violence. Most of them, but you know, also the UK was not the one threatening to impose a hard border. It was the EU that was talking about that. See? So, you know, the thing is a mess. Boris Johnson, who directly negotiated this with Ursula von der Leyen, is responsible for signing it. Right. But you know, Boris Johnson is not the only person affected by it, and you know, he may. You know, it's up to the people of Northern Ireland. There's a lot of talk also about the Good Friday Agreement comes into it. You know, the idea that there mustn't be a hard border is supposedly written into it's an interpretation of the Good Friday Agreement, but the Good Friday Agreement is not just for the Republican community in Northern Ireland. It's also for the Unionists, because the also the Unionist paramilitary involved in the conflict. If they're unhappy with this, then yeah, to listen to. My colleague said about sharing. Well, power sharing is also, but you know what's so good about agreement? Well, I don't think power sharing is a kind of. Maybe they should just, someone to form, parties to get together because no party has a majority in the Stormont Assembly and form a government and allow politics to proceed the way it does in every other country.
Okay, Boris Johnson has defied all the criticisms, going his way and published legislation to, as some people call it, rip up the Brexit and insists that there is no other way to protect the peace process in Northern Ireland. Is there really no other way?
Well, let's look at that question in its entirety. What is the threat to the Northern Ireland peace process? The majority of people here voted to remain within the European Union. The majority of elected representatives of the people at Stormont, the regional Northern Ireland Assembly, are happy with the Northern Ireland Protocol. So the only people threatening the stability of the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, and peace that we have lived with and through for the last 30 odd years, or whatever it happens to be, the only threat to that is from militant unionism and from loyalist paramilitaries. And as soon as people accept that to be the complete and real truth of the situation, and the sooner the British government and others face down the threat of loyalist violence, which is hanging in the background, we are marking a centenary of 100 years of partition on the island of Ireland, brought to us by British guns and by guns of loyalist paramilitaries of the Ulster Volunteer Force of 1912 and people after that. So they are the threat to the peace process. If people want peace and stability, leave the Northern Ireland Protocol alone. It's been agreed with the British government. It's been agreed with 26 other countries within the European Union. Face down loyalist extremists, and within 15 years, it's quite possible Ireland will be reunified, and this will not be a problem because the whole country will probably be in its entirety out of the United Kingdom and completely within the European Union.
Okay. James, Northern Ireland's unionists have refused to join a power-sharing government in Belfast with Sinn Féin that you mentioned, unless the protocol that covers trading arrangements in the region is rewritten. Let's have your thoughts on that.
Okay, I mean, like I was saying earlier, power sharing is part of the Good Friday Agreement, but you may ask what's so good about the Good Friday Agreement in that regard, and as my fellow guest said, he's arguing that the majority of members of the Stormont Assembly are in favour of the protocol. I'll get into that in a minute. Well, why not allow them to form a majority government then, instead of having this power sharing thing, which is a political fudge? I mean, you only have this there's no real need for it, let's say. But I mean, you go a bit further with this. I mean, who really wants the protocol? I mean, Sinn Féin doesn't want the protocol. It wants reunification and Irish reunification, and that is one solution to the problem. But another solution would be for the Republic of Ireland to leave the EU. It might be easier, in fact, because for reunification you have to have a majority on both sides of the border in favour of it. And Ireland leaving the EU would only require a referendum in the south. Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, trades a lot more with the UK than it does with the EU. So actually, the Republic being outside of the EU would be beneficial for it. And now it's also, since Britain has left and EU tax income has gone down, tax income from the member states to Brussels has gone down, and Ireland is now a net sort of payer into the EU treasury as well. So this isn't a great situation. And the EU hasn't really been kind to the Republic of Ireland over the years either. So yeah, okay. Look at some of the other parties. I mean, the DUP doesn't want the protocol. The DUP wants, Northern Ireland to stay part of the UK forever. Other parties, the SDLP, they don't want the protocol. They want Britain back in the EU, don't they? Because they probably did quite well off the whole European Parliament gravy train.
Okay.
So that's what they want.
All right.
Nobody really, I don't think they really want the protocol. They have other ulterior motives. And using Brexit or the situation of Brexit as to sort of piggyback, or Irish reunification onto, that's likely to be problematic. You know what I mean? People are not going to be satisfied with that.
Okay, James, Fry doesn't seem to agree with you. Let him now.
By all means, have a border poll, as they say, a referendum on the issue of reunification, but don't link it to Brexit, and don't link it to the EU, because the EU, it's problematic in a lot of ways.
It's Fry's
time now. The EU is
now.
becoming synonymous with NATO.
Okay, James.
The Republic of Ireland is not a member of NATO.
Okay, Fry's turn. Go ahead, Fry.
Has, been allowing the US.
Say about power sharing, as part of the mechanism to bring about a united government at Stormont, they brought in the Hunt principle. Now, I am an Irish Republican socialist, and I have lived in a country that has been partitioned by the British for 100 years. The first 50 years, up until 1970, votes were based not from one person, one vote. We had a gerrymandered state that gave a pro-British, pro-Protestant, pro-Unionist majority at the regime. In Stormont, we had a one-party, 10-pot semi-dictatorship for 50 years, which led to the Civil Rights Movement, which led to a demand for equality within the north of Ireland, within its institutions. This led to violence on the streets of Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland, and led to 25 to 30 years of conflict. But the Hunt mechanism is there to prevent unionists rejoining. There are separate strands of unionism represented at the regional assembly. If they join together in some form of a democratic government, what they would do is reinstitute the sectarian discriminations that people of my generation and above suffered for over 50 years. So without power sharing, there will be no devolved assembly. The people of Ireland are very much in favour of the EU. Personally, I am not in favour of the EU. I voted for Brexit. I believe in national sovereignty, but I'm not stupid and I am not naive. I live in this country. I know the politics. I know the sectarian nature, and I know that it is loyalist extremism that is forcing the British government to renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Okay, James, sorry for the interruption, but we have only 2-3 minutes for each question. I have to handle this. We've talked about Ireland enough. Let's talk about Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, James, is talking about holding a second independence vote from Britain by the end of next year. And she's arguing that Scotland will be better off outside of the UK. Is she right?
No, not at all. I mean, she doesn't. The Scottish government, the Scottish devolved administration, and the Scottish Parliament, they don't have the power to call a referendum. So what they're talking about would be, it would be like a kind of protest thing, just like they did in Catalonia a few years ago. Except this time, probably, unlike in Catalonia, they probably won't arrest Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP leadership, but. Scotland, about 60% of the goods that are produced in Scotland are sold in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and about less than a third as much of that is exported to EU member states. So no, it wouldn't. And Sturgeon was forced to admit today that they would have the same problem as with Northern Ireland currently if they left. If they became separate from, if they became independent from Britain, they would be in the EU common market and Britain would not, and you'd have to have tariffs and customs checks and so forth at the border. Maybe not tariffs if the free trade agreement holds up, but you'd have to have customs checks, so there would be problems with moving goods. And there are people who live on one side of the border, as they say, which is not a border, between Scotland and the historic border between Scotland and England, and work on the other side. And they would be citizens of different countries, and they would have to go through passport control to go to work and back every day. You know what I mean? it's a ridiculous idea. You know, the two countries are economically and socially integrated for hundreds of years.
Okay.
And it is ridiculous to talk about separating them. I mean, just as, you know, there are 1 million Irish people living in the UK and 200,000
Okay, James.
UK citizens living in the Republic of Ireland.
Okay, James, if you allow me, we're running out of time. We have only 1 minute and a half for Fra to answer the same questions.
About Scottish independence, I think you're either a Democrat or you're not a Democrat. You either believe that the people of any nation have the right to elect a government to act on their behalf, and if they want independence, that they should have independence. There are 26 countries in the European Union who are all connected in various stages. They all have land borders with each other. I know that through the European Union, those borders are now open, but they have separate languages, they have separate sovereign states, they have separate means of production within all those different countries. I am a Democrat. I believe, like many Scots and many Irish people do, that Scotland and Ireland have been subjugated under British military and political occupation for centuries. If you believe in democracy and the Scottish people want independence, why not let them have a referendum? Why not let them vote for it? And why not say, if you want your freedom and you want your independence and you want your dignity and you vote for it in a referendum and the referendum reaches 51% of the population, then as a Scottish or Irish person, I would demand that that referendum respect.
Okay, interesting discussion, but we're just running out of time very quickly. So thank you, my guest, James Tweedie in Plymouth, and Fra Hughes in Belfast. And thank you for watching this episode of The Spotlight. I've been your host, Behruz Najaf, and I'll see you next time.